Here's an important issue from the New York Times from Joanne Spatero. Ms. Spatero is a New York-based writer who's engaged to a transgender woman, which is to say a man, right, a biological man. And here is the piece from the New York Times, because the New York Times only traffics in the most important ideas, right? The things that we all have to come to grips with as a society. No, not like religious freedom or the value of life, not stuff about whether the government ought to be involved in your healthcare decisions. No, what they have to be involved in is explaining how it is that a woman and a man who's had some hormone treatments can have a baby, and it's the same thing as two lesbians magically having a baby, which is weird. Okay, so here's what it says. Our society may have lost its moorings just a little. Okay, so here's what the New York Times piece from Joanne Spatero says. Over the last several months, I've spent evenings watching my fiancée, Lara, inject herself with smaller and smaller doses of estrogen. Lara, again, is a biological man. I've watched her stand in front of a mirror, singeing each hair out of her face with a secondhand electrolysis machine. The return of her testosterone hasn't resulted in just the resurgence of facial hair. Her pants now fit differently, too. My own skin has been plagued by acne since I got off the pill 6 months ago, and my default states are angry, hungry, or sleeping. Such are the perils of trying to have a child the way Lara and I are trying, without in vitro fertilization or cryogenically frozen sperm, the way fertile cisgender people do. They simply couple up and boom, a child is born. I'm not sure why there are perils involved with this. I've done it twice. It was great. Okay, let's be real about this. Make babies pretty awesome. People have been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years. Not seeing the tough part here. And not seeing the reason we have to have a, let's look at this, 1,200-word essay on you having sex with a dude who thinks he's a lady. Not sure why that is worthy of space in the New York Times, but all right. I love that everything, if you could run a scam, right? Let's say, it's so funny. Folks on the left are constantly thinking that, the Bible thumpers, the people who believe in things like actual biology, that these people, what they're really seeking to do is they want to take lesbians and they want to marry them off to men and force them into a situation where they have to have biological children with a male. I guess all we have to do now is declare that the man's a woman, and then we're good, right? I mean, this woman's a lesbian, but she's having sex with a full-on man because the man is a woman, but not really, because he says he's a woman because he has some sort of mental disorder. And this is, again, worthy of coverage in the New York Times. For many young trans people, the question of having babies is likely the last thing on their minds. Who could blame them? Like all young people, they're figuring out their future, and matters of diapers and breastfeeding seem abstract and far off. But unlike all young people, young trans people are often making choices that have long-term consequences for their fertility, which is part of how I, a 32-year-old cisgender lesbian, and Lara, my 33-year-old trans fiancé, came to be in the situation we're in today, trying to conceive a child, even though Lara transitioned nearly 4 years ago. Well, Lara transitioned sort of. Lara still has the non-Lara parts, right? Lara still has the John parts, or whatever Lara's previous name was, her dead name, as they say. I didn't even vaguely realize I wanted biological kids until my mid-20s. Before then, I'd vaguely imagined that children would simply come to me a la Auntie Mame or Diane Keaton in Baby Boom. I'd inherit them from a long-lost relative and simply slot them into my independent, modern life. Little did I know that in just a few years, I'd be staying up to read studies in which scientists combined the eggs of 2 female rats to make a child, hoping for 50 more years on the planet so I'd be around when they began testing on humans. But you don't need them to combine 2 female eggs. You're having sex with a dude who has sperm. So that's odd. Again, the reason that I highlight this is just to demonstrate that when you cast out biological distinctions and pretend that science is something that science is not, you end up with bizarre notions like the idea that it's some sort of great earth-shaking event when a man and a woman have sex and promote and create a baby, because the man has been taking some hormone treatments. Also, this article is making a case that I'm pretty sure this writer doesn't want to make, right? Which is that it may be worthwhile for transgender people not to actually mutilate their own genitals. That it may be worthwhile for them to keep the genitals that they have so that they can actually procreate when they choose to do so. And this is actually the subtle case that is being made by this article, but it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. So at the very end, Joanne Spatero actually says that. She says, the truth is, some people know from the beginning they never want kids, but some, even those who thought they were sure, can one day find themselves feeling differently, especially if they meet someone they'd love to blend genes with. These people can then find that permanent decisions made early on may have closed doors before they even knew they wanted to open them. So pretty interesting stuff, actually, is that the conclusion of the article is the conservative conclusion that you may want to wait to have hormone treatment and mutilate your body because you think that you're a member of the opposite sex, because you may never know what sort of choices you want to make later. So... but this is what happens when a society decides to purposely confuse itself about basic concepts like what gender constitutes. It is pretty obvious that this is having a significant impact on the society at large. Now, I guess the government is going to tell your children how to think about these issues. So on Monday, there's a feminist writer named Jessica Valenti, And she made pretty clear why a lot of conservatives are looking to homeschool their kids. Okay, she tweeted out this. She tweeted out, to the folks who find LGBT language confusing, if my daughter's second grade class gets it, so can you. Okay, and here is what the picture that she tweeted out says. It says, lesbian, a woman who has only romantic feelings about women. Gay, a man who has only romantic feelings about men. Bi, a person who has romantic feelings about men and women. Why would a 7-year-old need to know these things, you ask? Because we have to indoctrinate them at 7 years old. Otherwise, they'll turn out to be intolerant Americans. Transgender, a person who is assigned male or female at birth but doesn't identify that way. Okay, that is so anti-scientific, I cannot even begin to explain it. Okay, you're not assigned male or female at birth. It's not like the doctor sits there and flips a coin and goes, you know what? You're a male. I just figured it out. You know, we're going to assign it to you. Right? Just like you're given an assignment in class. No, the doctor looks at the pee-pee or the juju and then says, you are a male or a female. Okay, this is really not difficult. Seriously, the doctor does not assign sex at birth. By the way, if you're going to say the doctor assigns sex, assigns it, then you're going to have to go back to the ultrasound because by 10 weeks, you know whether your baby's a boy or a girl. In fact, we can tell even earlier than that in some cases simply by looking at the mother's bloodstream because certain cells from the baby are present in blood tests for the mother, and you can tell whether the baby is a boy or a girl. That's not a sign. I mean, this notion that sex is some sort of social construct is so insane, or that gender is completely untethered from sex. It doesn't even make sense according to the advocates of transgenderism. If gender and sex are completely untethered, then why is it that transgender people want to appear to look like women? Why is it that transgender people find it important to use female names? If all this is untethered from sex and completely arbitrary, then wouldn't you just assume you could be transgender without picking up any of those cultural stereotypes that have been created by that patriarchal white cisgender society? And also, these second graders are learning a person who is assigned male or female at birth and does identify that way is a cisgender person. A queer person, it's complex and can mean a lot of things. A person who doesn't identify as straight or bi or gay or lesbian. Well, thanks for that clarification. And straight is a man who only has romantic feelings about women or a woman who only has romantic feelings about men. Again, I'm so glad that second graders are learning this in Jessica Valenti's second grade child's class. Very important stuff. The reason I bring this up is because the same government that says it gets to decide whether your child should live or die in Britain is the same government that gets to decide whether your school teaches you this propaganda or not. Okay, so there's a Jewish school in Britain. It's been threatened for 2 years by the British authorities because it is a Jewish school, meaning they do not want to teach propaganda from the LGBT left. They're not interested in teaching about the moral equivalence between heterosexual sex and homosexual sex. They're not interested in teaching about the socially approved ideas of transgenderism. They say that God made men and God made women, and there are some people who are born intersex, but that's not the same thing as transgenderism. That school is now being threatened with its license revocation in Britain. Okay, so the same government that's telling you how to raise your child is telling you when your child has to die. Centralized government is such a nightmare. This is why it sort of matters when you see these pieces that seem to be on the wild left, because everything that starts off on the wild left ends up on the mainstream left within about 5 minutes. Right? The whole goal here is indoctrination of children. And you can see this even insofar as there's another story that's insane. Apparently, according to LifeSite News, transgender activists gathered outside a Rhode Island Catholic church last week. It's a Catholic church, for God's sake, to protest a lecture delivered by pediatrician Michelle Cretella, who views affirming transgenderism in kids as a form of child abuse. Okay, it's a Catholic church. What do you think she is going to say? By the way, I tend to agree with this position. I tend to agree with the position that if my 2-year-old came to me and said, Daddy, I'm a girl, and I said to him, you know what, you're right, kid, you're a girl. Ignore all your biology, you're a girl. That purposefully confusing children is a form of child abuse. I think that there's a solid case to be made for this. Michelle, certainly the idea of genitally mutilating or hormonally mutilating children, I think, is a form of child abuse, pretty obviously. In any case, Michelle Cretella is president of the American College of Pediatricians, and she's made it her mission to highlight the harmful effects of gender transitioning on children, according to Paul Bois over at Daily Wire. At the time of her comments, Rhode Island had recently enacted a law stripping parents of their right to object to providing treatment for gender transition to children who showed signs of gender dysphoria. Okay, the Roman Island Catholic explained the law, quote, last year, the state of Rhode Island made it illegal for a licensed medical professional to counsel a child away from the desire to change his or her gender identity. Yet it remains legal to inject that same child with hormone blockers and cross-sex hormones. Currently, Rhode Island public schools are deciding how to implement statewide transgender policies that would open up bathrooms, locker rooms, and sports teams to anyone who claims to be the opposite gender from their biological sex. It's one thing to argue that if you're a parent, you should be allowed to make the terrible decision about forwarding your child's transgender feelings. I said it's a terrible decision because studies show that well over 80% of all children who believe they are transgender when they are children outgrow it by the time they're teenagers. Very often they end up gay or lesbian. Okay, but the state has now mandated that everyone be indoctrinated with these ideas. And it's a very short leap from here to the idea that homeschooling itself should be illegal. So a lot of Christians, a lot of Jews have started taking their kids, Muslims too, have started taking their kids out of public schools and educating their children at home to avoid these social leftist strictures. Well, the state is not going to stand for that. The state is going to say that you are not licensed to do that and your kid is a truant. And then they will say next that if your kid does not learn what the state wants your kid to learn, then they will take your kid away from you and give them up to foster care. They'll send in child protective services. I am predicting this right now, okay? You can mark the date. I've been predicting this for months now. You can mark the date. Today is April 25th. Within 5 years, there will be a serious movement in this country to end homeschooling simply because everyone on the left believes that homeschooling is a threat to their social values. And the case will be made that you're bringing up kids to be intolerant, that you're bringing up kids to be cruel and nasty. Parental power will shrink as the power of the state grows. So anyway, this woman, Dr. Cretella, she was speaking at the St. Pius V Church in Providence and 40 LGBT activists showed up outside, and then they started protesting her. It's just astonishing. Again, they're protesting churches. This is why when people on the left say, why do you feel so threatened by all of this? Okay, you can do what you want. It's a free country. You know, go to whatever lefty church you want to go to. Don't go to church at all. I don't care. Right? Be gay, be lesbian, be transgender. You're an adult. Your decision. Okay, as a religious person, I can think your decisions are sinful. Doesn't matter. It's a free country. You can think I'm an idiot. But I will tell you that once you start going outside churches and protesting traditional churches, suggesting those traditional churches have to change their ways or face your wrath, you're talking about something deeply disturbing